The Archdiocese of Chicago is a vibrant and diverse faith community. We celebrate our faith through worship, evangelization, and reaching out to the needy. Welcome to Catholic Chicago.
Good morning, welcome to Catholic Chicago. I'm Father Greg Sakowitz, the rector of Holy Name Cathedral in Chicago. And to my left, Mark Teresi, who is coordinating along with John Silver and Claire Gregor, our 175th anniversary as a parish of the cathedral. And then on November 21, 2025, Cathedral 150 years as a cathedral. Good morning, Mark. How are you?
Wonderful, wonderful. And we're very excited about November 18th, which is the actual anniversary of the founding of our faith community.
175 years ago to the day.
Mass at 12.
12 o'clock Mass.
The city's naming that day, the Holy Name Cathedral Day, and then November 24th, the Cardinal will have Mass at 12:30 to celebrate the beginning of our 175th year. So we'll send emails, watch Chicago Catholic, a lot of different places where you'll have info on all the celebrations. For
the whole year-long celebration, and a lot coming up, and an exciting time at the cathedral. Great program lined up today. COVID-19 pandemic was a difficult time for countless number of people of all faiths, of all backgrounds. During that difficult time, there stood out voices that inspired hope. Eugene Giudice was one of those voices. He wrote and distributed his second book of reflection titled A Librarian's Sojourn, Messages of Hope and Inspiration. Joining us today in the studio, in the Cardinal Francis George TV studio, is Eugene Giudice. Eugene, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Father Greg. Good to have you. Good to be with you as well, Mark.
Thank you very much.
And the thing is, to let the listeners know, Eugene, I met you and Colleen. You moved into the parish, St. Mary of the Woods. I got there in 1992 as the associate. 1997 became the pastor. You and Colleen moved in when?
Labor Day of 2002.
So I'd been there about 10 years. Yeah. And you are still at St. Mary of the Woods.
Still at St. Mary of the Woods.
Father Rich Jakubek as the pastor.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I know you're very, very active over there.
Yes. Colleen's in the choir now. I work as an extraordinary minister of the Eucharist. We have the Knights of Columbus Council that's meeting in the parish, so it's a great time for the apostolate.
So I can't believe that I've known you and Colleen for 22 years, because when you moved in, you got very active from the very beginning.
Well, actually, you and I go further back to your days as rector of Niles Seminary.
I was the rector, I was on the faculty.
When you were on faculty.
He wished he was the rector.
Bob Glock did a great job with Lee Kiley.
You and I met at a Knights of Columbus banquet that LaSalle Assembly was putting on for seminaries. So this is going many years back from that. So
35 years.
You and I go back.
You're right.
30 plus years.
And the Knights are very supportive of the seminary.
Yes.
They're phenomenal. And Ron Ziemba and the group that started the
and Ron is still going with it strong.
Is he really?
Yes.
Yeah,
wonderful.
His wife Diane. Wonderful people. Now we all know, Eugene, starting in March of 2020, when things shut down with COVID-19, all the way through June 15th of 2020, and then even things started opening up so slowly. You couldn't go to the lakefront, restaurants still closed. It was a horrible time. COVID-19 was truly a game changer. How did it affect your life? And from that, you wrote 2 books.
Well, what had happened was, I'm a librarian by profession, and I work in a law firm. And we were given the mandate to, everybody work from home. So very suddenly, we were thrust into a work from home model, everybody in the firm, nationwide. And what I realized early on, that there was going to be a great deal of isolation, a great deal of consternation, and it was going to be an emotional time for people. So I pondered this and I said, what can I do to do 2 things? One, help break that isolation and get people to think about a post-pandemic world. So I started writing. I started off with individuals in my own team at the office. Then it grew to some friends and family. Then it was the word got out. Librarians across the nation wanted to be added to the email list. So what turned out to be what I thought was going to be sort of a 90-day writing project turned into a 2+ years writing project of reflections. So what I would do is I would base the reflection on some famous or maybe not so famous person's quotation, and then elaborate on that. And then eventually, as I was writing these things, I began to ponder not necessarily just a post-pandemic world, but a post-pandemic world based on justice, compassion, and inclusion. Because if we don't get those three right, all the social programs, all the work that is done in outreach by the church, government is going to be, we're not even going to be there. It's
Eugene, was this a daily or weekly reflection?
Daily. I was doing it I started out 5 days a week. So basically during the work week, I would send it out. Towards the end, it got to be about maybe 2 to 3 times a week.
Because I was on that list.
You were on that list.
So how many were on that list? Hundreds?
By my best count, about 300, 350.
Where did this discipline come from? Had you written a book before this?
No, I had not done anything remotely close to this. Mm-hmm. I had done some journaling many years ago, but I would not call that writing in the classical sense. I think it was the need that I sensed in the community, in my own workplace community, the librarian community, the
St. Mary of the Woods. You were sending parishioners.
St. Mary of the Woods community. I mean, because there was no masses going on. We were.
I had parishioners calling me, being the former pastor, talking about your reflections. They loved them.
Yeah. So.
I thought it was fantastic. I read every day.
I take that as high praise. But I think it was just the Spirit was moved in different ways, and the Spirit moved me to do this, and that's where the discipline came. Some days the writing came very easily, and some days, man, you were just grinding it out. You've both done serious writing. You know how it goes some days. Some days it's very easy. Some days it's like, I don't have anything to say.
Did you find that during the pandemic, you were a very outgoing person, you are not shy, and to be home.
Who's spreading that rumor?
not our little Eugene here.
He is.
And but you wouldn't be able to visit neighbors. You couldn't even go to church. No activities. Nothing. Maybe you could walk through the Caldwell Woods across the street from your home. But everything was in isolation. How did that affect you?
I think it affected me mostly because then I became more aware of what I had lost by not having the social interaction at work, not being able to see family and friends. My mom passed early in the pandemic, not from COVID-19. She had been ailing for some time. We couldn't even hold what would consider the traditional funeral service. So I'm fortunate. My brother-in-law is owner of the Cooney Funeral Home in Park Ridge, and we did something there. And it was Holy Thursday. It was amazing because Chuck Thompson, whom you know, was the deacon in our parish. Said, Eugene, my Thursday's now free. He came. We did this. Was me, Colleen, and my brother-in-law. Yep. And so it radically caused me to think about what is vital in life, what is important to life, and also made me consider afterwards, what does it mean to have a radical hospitality and a generosity of spirit in that hospitality?
As you were gathering material for the book, tell us about a day where something really just struck you, however, emotionally, physically, intellectually. Pick one of those days.
I tell you a story. It's in the book. I happened to be. This was later on in the pandemic, and I was at the Walgreens on Higgins and Canfield. Sure. You know where that's at.
I know where it is.
And there was a young person in the store, and she had a T-shirt on that said something basically, run until you're empty. And I thought about this idea of emptying out oneself, pouring oneself into life, and that became the basis of a reflection that week. I was very fortunate that I was able to make use of the Roman calendar. I've used quotations from saints on their saints' day. Oscar Romero is one prominently noted in the book.
And the name of your first book was?
Reflections During a Pandemic, Thoughts While Sheltering in Place.
I want you to hold up the book right here. Maybe Michael can get a Librarian's Sojourn, Messages of Hope and Inspiration. Where can somebody get a copy?
Amazon.
Okay, so walk us through that. So hold it up again. It's right here.
Oh, there it is.
And spell your last name.
Giudice.
One more time.
G as in George, I-U, D as in David, I-C as
And
in
the
Charlie.
Librarian's Sojourn, Messages of Hope and Inspiration. Mark?
Now, first of all, I look at the book.
It's big.
And it's big. It's like the big book that they wrote for Sears, where
Yeah.
I remember in graduate school, I said I'd read that. I didn't know how big it was.
Mm-hmm.
So when did you know it was finished?
It was in October of 22. I had sensed that this project was coming to an end because restrictions were being lifted. I was seeing changes in individuals, and at a certain point, I didn't have the emotional capacity or the time capacity to dedicate to the writing. It takes a lot, as you both know. Mm-hmm. It takes a lot to do serious writing.
Because when you had during the pandemic, we had the time, but even coming out of the pandemic, things opened up so slowly. Do you realize that in churches, including Cathedral, we were limited in how many people could come?
Yeah.
The Cathedral capacity was 200. Mary the Woods might have been 100, and you had six feet apart, register to come in. It was so hard.
And how do you build community? I mean, it really...
You couldn't. You could not build community, Eugene. And remember, instead of meeting, like even our radio program in those days, before the studio came about here, was that no guests were allowed. Yeah. Even Mark and I had to make sure we were 6 feet apart at the opposite ends of this table. We let our viewers know that we're 6 feet apart. Even I was taping the TV Mass with Cardinal Supich on ABC. I made a point to be 5 or 6 feet away from Cardinal Supich as a concelebrant, not next to him, but spaced away. On television. That was for a whole year, staying 5 or 6 feet apart from him. So it was such a game changer. I remember once during the pandemic, I was walking on Superior East, and I'm walking down the street. A lady is walking toward me. She crossed the street, so we couldn't even pass on the sidewalk. She crossed the street.
I've had that happen many times, and it talks about really the necessity of community, not only in the faith context, but also in the social context, in the social construct. Again, it's in the book. I am a frequent, maybe frequent is not the right word, but I'm not unknown at All Saints Cemetery in Des Plaines, because a lot of Colleen's, well, all of Colleen's family or parents and things are there, and I'm one of those people that I make the pilgrimage. I go frequently, and I always go to Cardinal George's grave, which is easy to know because it has the little orange cone.
Yeah,
it's right on the road.
It's right on the road. You can't miss it. And again, it's in the book. I mentioned this, and I noted that on that tablet that is on his grave, the first thing that is mentioned, not his high church offices, but the fact that he was a member of a religious community, and this idea of community joined with the other idea of a radical hospitality. I learned about this from, not sort of indirectly, there's a Benedictine monastery down near where the Sox play. You've been there.
Oh, sure.
And they always, in their tradition, the Benedict always speak about a radical hospitality.
Welcome all as Christ. Welcome
before we go into the break,
Christ.
If you know it or not, Eugene, your book has brought people together with a common bond. And I'll give you an example there. that during the peak of COVID, Cardinal Supich on Channel 7 ABC Mass, I'd be the concelebrant, great homilist, never uses a note, and he was receiving a lot of letters from people across Chicagoland, across the country, who would see it on YouTube or off their computer. And a lady from, I think it was Naperville or Downers Grove, said, "Dear Cardinal Supich, thank you for the Mass on ABC. You have brought all of us together." And that so struck Cardinal Supich. He showed me the letter saying, look at this, Greg, and thank you, Cardinal Supich. You have brought all of us together through TV, which is not ideal, but brought us all together. The same thing with your book. People, you brought them together through your words of wisdom and message of inspiration and hope. Mark, take us to break.
Yes, so I'll give you a moment to think about this. When we come back,
He likes to ask a tough question to break.
Well, it's a great lead into what my question will be when we come back. I look at this book and your stories as the gospel of Eugene. So it's the gospel. I want you to think about during the break, what's a parable that came out of that book that you want to preach to our
And parable
folks?
is a story with a twist.
Okay, so
Go to
we'll
break.
take a little break. Catholic Chicago, Father Greg Sakowicz, Mark Teresi with Eugene Giudice, and a librarian, Sojourn, Messages of Hope and Inspiration, and he will be preaching to us in a moment.
I am a seminarian.
The Church needs compassionate and well-trained priests to help guide each of us through life.
What inspires me, what draws me always to the priesthood is continue to see priests be a beacon of hope for other people.
You can play a part in the education of these young men as they prepare for a life of service to others.
I want to be that beacon of hope too, and it sets my heart on fire.
To support our seminarians, make your gift at archchicago.org/seminarian fund or call 312-534-7959.
People always say, how can you spend your day with 3-year-olds? Seeing the changes that they go through and just the journey and how they grow, this is a very rewarding job. Even though at the end of the day, we're not the highest paid people on earth. And when I have a parent contact me and say, my child loves school, that to me, I'm setting that foundation for their love of learning. Because really, you are changing lives, you are molding lives.
Shape the next generation of leaders. Teach. Apply today at archchicago.org/schooljobs.
Welcome back to Catholic Chicago. Father Greg Sakowicz, Mark Teresi, Eugene Giudice. Before the break, we were talking about the gospel according to Eugene with this beautiful book, A Librarian, Sojourn, Messages of Hope and Inspiration. I asked Eugene, is there a parable that you can preach to our folks that came from the book and inspired you?
I think one of the things that came out of the book in terms of, it's always about the journey. And one of the things that I mention in the book is the famous, the Camino de Santiago de Compostela, the famous pilgrimage in Spain. I happened to watch the movie The Way with Martin Sheen, who talks about where he goes on the pilgrimage and his experience. And one of the things that always struck me about pilgrimage is that individuals go on pilgrimage. They do it as an individual activity. But what happens is that the individual gets subsumed sort of in the community of the pilgrimage, and it becomes something bigger than themselves. And the pilgrimage just doesn't end. It doesn't have a stop and an end. You know, you start off like in the Camino. One of the routes you start in the Pyrenees, and you end in the city of Santiago de Compostela. But the pilgrimage never really ends. And that's one of the things that I'm it's always coming to me, and it's always renewed in me the fact that this pilgrimage that we are on, some people call it a veil of tears. You remember the old prayer that talks about this life as a veil of tears, and I reject that to a certain extent, because this pilgrimage is meant to be something of meaning. It's not just something we do individually. And I'd like the listeners to consider that their own pilgrimage has value, not only for themselves, but for the wider community, the larger community that they come in contact with.
Yeah,
I think along those lines, a great story about life being a pilgrimage is the story of a young man who searches all of Europe for the holy man. He one day finds him, knocks on his door, the holy man lets him in his house, and the young man looks around, and all he sees is a desk, a bed, a chair, and many, many books. And the young man asks the holy man, he says, well, where's your furniture? And the holy man says, well, where's yours? And the young man says, I'm only a visitor, I'm only passing through. And the holy man says, so am I, so am I. In this life, we are only passing through to God.
It's interesting you mentioned about going to see the holy man, because there's this great tradition in our church of the Desert Fathers, the great mystics, the men primarily, and men and women who lived in isolation. But all the stories about these holy men and women was like, so-and-so went up to go see the holy. It's always in context of community, that they're interacting with others.
How does your community at St. Mary of the Woods, how have they been impacted from your observation from COVID, but how is it changing now? How are they being rejuvenated?
I think one of the things that I came away with is that for me, the necessity of gathering in person for the Eucharist. I'm hoping that, some people got a little, for want of a better word, lax in Sunday attendance. I think we're starting to see, hopefully, more people actually coming back to Mass, coming back to the Eucharist, because the Eucharist, by its name, the liturgy means the public work. It's something you do.
The action of the people.
The action of the people. It's something you don't do in isolation. And to really get the full measure of what the liturgy, the Mass, the Eucharist, it has to be experienced in community.
Now, for those that are truly homebound, to watch it on Channel 7 with the Cardinal or Channel 9, Mercy Home, makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Now, many people actually do this. They go to early Mass, watch the Cardinal or Mercy Home at 9:30, or watch the Cardinal on Channel 7 from the Cathedral or Mercy Home on 9, and then go to Mass. But you're right, for those people who find it so convenient to get up at 9:20, put on a pot of coffee, watch it at 9:30, 10 o'clock, click, shut it off, and be about their day running around. It's so important, because to be present for Eucharist in person, from television, there's no Eucharist in person or community, which are so vital. Is there a place for TV Mass? Absolutely. Thousands of people who are homebound who call me, email me, say, Father Greg, thank you for the Mass with the Cardinal, thank you for the Mass for Mercy Home. And so it's very, very much needed. But you're always stressing, Eugene, that sense of community, that sense of belonging, that we're not built for isolation.
I mean, I've availed myself of the Mass from Mercy Home and the Mass with the Cardinal a number of times when I was, not necessarily during the COVID time, but when I was ill. I remember distinctly I couldn't raise my hand above my shoulder because I had a problem with my shoulders. It's like my wife said, listen, stay bundled up, watch it from home.
Yeah, don't jeopardize your health.
Don't jeopardize. So there is a place for that, and it's a wonderful opportunity to experience the gospel in a slightly different way. I mean, I'm old enough to remember when it was called Mass for Shut-ins.
Oh, sure.
Yes.
But it is now a refocusing on the fact that this is the gospel being preached.
Now I have a question about your book. Usually with an author, there's a next book in mind.
Oh God, no.
No.
I don't. This was a function of time and place, and the first one was a function of time and place. I don't have the skill or the gravamen or the gravitas to put together a third book.
Now, Eugene, if the pandemic had never happened, would book 1 or 2 have happened?
Oh, absolutely not.
Because you're about. Now, let me ask you this. Maybe Mark asked this earlier. How did the pandemic and writing this book change your life for today?
I think I'm becoming more cognizant of the little things in life, and I'm becoming more aware of how I am acting in the public space and how I'm treating others. It never fails to amaze me, and I don't want to sort of move to a sort of a darker place, but I go into so many, fast food restaurants, stores. They have a little sign on the door that says, "We will not tolerate abuse of our employees." I mean, in my day growing up, you would have never thought of. You wouldn't have to be told that. You wouldn't have to. And I'm afraid that in society we are forgetting. We are forgetting the lessons that we learned during the pandemic. The hard lessons that we had to learn during the pandemic. And I really am concerned about that. So hopefully this will remind people of those lessons. I was writing I did a promo video on YouTube for the book, and I mentioned that they say that the news is often the first rough cut of history. Well, I'm hoping that this book is another aspect of that rough cut of history, that in years to come, people will look at this and say, this is what one person was thinking, this is what one person was doing, how to build community.
It's very interesting, Eugene, to walk into a fast food place or restaurant and say that our employees will not be abused by you.
Yeah.
We live in a society right now in your face, that people are not kind to each other. If I disagree with you, I'm in your face. My meal wasn't proper, I'm in your face. To do it in a very polite way, because you know what? I've come to realize this, that when I go to a restaurant, believe it or not, and I'm being waited on by the waiter or waitress, I'm sometimes asking myself, what is your life like today? Are you going through a tough marriage? Is your mother dying? Did your father lose his job? Did your spouse lose their job? How's your physical health? So then sometimes we don't see them as a human being. Well, that's the waiter, that's the waitress. But there's a human being behind the title, and how do we treat each other? Even when I'm at the airport and people are walking by, I'll sometimes focus on someone and pray for them. As they're walking quickly through the terminal, I'll focus on a person as they're walking. I'm saying, I hope God blesses you this day. I pray for you for peace and courage, so that we're all in this together, but we need to bring this program to a close. One more time, Eugene, hold up the book, and the title
is A Librarian Sojourn, Messages of Hope and Inspiration.
And how can they get a copy?
You can get it on Amazon. It is available both as hardback, soon a paperback, and also an ebook. And you don't have to read this cover to cover. I know people that will just open it up to any old day and read the reflection for that particular.
And the thing is, Eugene Giudice, spell your last name.
Giudice.
So I want to thank in a very special way Eugene Giudice for being on the program today. This has been enlightening, Eugene. And please give our love to Colleen. Hard to believe that we go back from the parish 22 years.
Yeah.
So I want to thank you, Eugene. Thank again to co-host Mark Teresi, another wonderful job.
Thank you.
Special thanks to producer and director Michael May, who did double duty today by himself. To our listeners, may God bless all of you, and blessings upon this day and your week.